If this video title spoke to you, then let's quickly set the intention and declare that this information will propel you on your highest timeline. So, retrocausality, what is this? What does this mean, being in a retrocausal relationship with the absolute? So, from this human perspective, we know that the absolute has to exist, because otherwise nothing would exist. We do, however, not know what it actually is. There is multiple options that we could basically go with in terms of defining, describing, imagining the absolute. Another thing that we can actually realize is that the type of definition we find the absolute to be is actually having a dramatic impact on the path that an individual takes. For example, if somebody declares his own projection into the absolute to be Allah, like the Islamic doctrine, then his choices, his pathway, will be according to this imagination, to this projection into the absolute. So we could actually, if we are actually honest to ourselves and realize that we don't know, and nobody can make us actually, nobody can give us information about what the absolute really is as knowledge. It's always going to be information and inspiration. And therefore, nobody can really make you or force you to adopt a certain definition about the absolute. This is a subjective thing. I mean, we can certainly inspire each other, and some ideas, some concepts are more logically coherent in itself or in themselves, but ultimately you can declare what it is from your perspective, and this will have an impact on your automatic unfolding of your will in action. It shapes your whole fundamental principle of reality interpretation. And that's quite profound, because that gives you, by the facts of the human reality experience, full permission to use this in order to shape your path, shape your, even the unconscious aspects of the unfolding of your path, and therefore who you're going to become, and also how happy you are while navigating this reality. So we can actually take authorship by that realization of the facts of this reality. And also, I mean, every information in general has to go through the interpretation of the individual in order to have any type of meaning for the individual. And that shows as well that no human can actually make you know what it is, because a human can't know what it is. So I'm wondering why we as humans are so rarely consciously using this fact of reality. Another example, which is very common, is to project into the absolute determinism. The absolute to be determinism. And whatever we project into it, that leads to a kind of cascading sequence of conclusion, which then has or is the impact on one's own interpretation of reality. So what sense you make of the information that you receive. So when we keep thinking about the absolute in a absolutely deterministic way, then the conclusion could be, or oftentimes it is, that there is no free will, for example. That everything is just predetermined. I mean, that's another topic in and of itself. But the idea that free will therefore doesn't exist is actually a subjective phenomenon. Nobody can say this in a general sense with absolute certainty, because we can't prove by fact what the absolute actually is. So from our perspective, the absolute is a constant that has to be there because existence exists. However, around that constant and around the logical frame set, it's malleable, and it's actually very meaningful to kind of define this in a self-determined and conscious manner. So, might as well take this opportunity to use this to align yourself with the reality expression that you basically want to be. So what can we say about the absolute? We can't say it has to exist. That's a given. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. So I think there's a few concepts that actually seem or lead to a logically coherent cascading sequence of conclusions that are actually in alignment with this reality, with the obvious facts of this reality. So let's quickly declare what are the really obvious facts that are undeniable. I like to point out 5, which is I am, otherwise I couldn't communicate if I wouldn't exist. Then I prefer happiness. I mean, that's kind of obvious. It's the fundamental principle of reality interpretation. Another one is this human experience, this human body is mortal. I mean, you see me sweat already, even though I'm just walking up this little hill. Another fact is that we can ask the question, what is beyond death? Am I going to cease to exist? Am I going to proceed? And when? How? So we are definitely, by fact, capable of asking this question. And the fifth fact that I like to point out is, I think I've already stated it, every information has to go through the interpretation of the individual in order to have meaning for the individual. So, what are the definitions about the absolute that lead to a logically coherent conclusion in regards to our experience? The concept that I like to go with is that existence itself is infinite potential. Why does existence need to be infinite potential? First of all, it's kind of a funny argument, honestly, but if it wouldn't be infinite potential, then it would probably already be boring. There would be nothing to explore anymore. However, that's not the case. I don't know what is actually going to occur in 10 minutes. Also, why does it has to be potential when it's infinity? That's because infinity always is linked to potentiality. Because when you would know everything of infinity, everything about infinity until the end, then it wouldn't be infinite anymore. So when we're talking about infinity, then it is always inevitably linked to potential, it being potential. So existence itself could be seen as just this: every potential, every single potential. That's quite a lot. So, in this potential, in this infinite, every potential, this ether, how some like to call it, also is the potential for a initial spark, a spark of reality. Some would like to call it the divine spark or whatever. And when we go with this premise that this is possible, which would be possible because if it's every potential, then it has to be inclusive of also that potential. The potential of the initial spark of reality, of realizing, of perception. That's really cool. There's like a bug sitting on this gamble. Not gamble. It doesn't matter. So when we go with this premise that there is an initial spark as a potential in the field, then we can come to logically coherent conclusions about what properties this initial spark would need to have. So I will just give you my idea about it, and you please correct me in the comments, tell me if I'm wrong, if I'm right. Just take this as inspiration. Like I said, it's a individual aspect of reality, this retrocausal feedback loop between you and the absolute. Oh, by the way, why is it retrocausal? It's retrocausal because you are actually projecting it from here and now. You're projecting from here and now what is the absolute source of everything, which then makes your path be according to that projection. That is what we can actually see. Like I said, the whole cultures are structured by these types of projections. So they are very powerful and also sometimes potentially dangerous. But yeah, everybody has to decide this for himself. So the initial spark. What properties does the initial spark need to have? When I apply my logic, then it first of all need to have the property of being the initial spark. Because every other spark wouldn't be the initial spark, obviously. What would it also need to have? It would also need to have it would need to be almighty, all-powerful, all-knowing, unlimited, instantly, all at once, instantly everything it can be in the state of unlimitedness. Why would it need to have this property? Because every other potential initial spark couldn't exist beside it. It wouldn't be possible. Because the almighty initial spark, the everything all at once, instantly initial spark, would be the dominant one. If we take the idea of the infinite field with the potential of the initial spark as the start of reality seriously. Another property that it would also need to have is love. Why? So first of all, in that state, in this initial state, there would be no difference between self-love and love because there wouldn't be somebody else to love. So we could also say it would need to have the property of self-love. And that the reason for this is that, at least that's my idea. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but this is just the premise that I like to go with, is that if it wouldn't have self-love as an inherent intention, then it would at some point in infinity cease to exist. So when we are thinking about it in a timeless context, then only an initial spark with the inherent property of love would kind of make it through infinity. I hope that's understandable. But correct me if I'm wrong. So with that frame set, I mean, please tell me as well, what do you think? What would such an initial spark need to have in terms of properties? So with that frame set, we can basically imagine what the rest is. So this gives us kind of permission to imagine basically the rest, using our logic and the inherent preference in terms of what concepts occur to the individual as meaningful, as purposeful, as so which concepts make the person, the individual, happy. That would be kind of the guiding principle to navigate all these inspirations, all these ideas of the metaphysical aspects of this human experience. The beautiful thing about this idea with the infinite field, the initial spark, with the few but undeniable properties it would need to have from our perspective, is that it's still malleable and it induces an inherent problem. Because, I mean, I'll come to why this is a positive thing. The inherent problem of this initial spark would be its unlimitedness. So, when this initial spark, we are thinking about it as a conscious type presence, because of the intention for love, and realization is about consciousness, and therefore we would also assume that it would need to have will to make something happen, to realize something. However, in the state of Almighty, all-powerful, it would be in control of everything. And therefore it would be absolutely free. But an absolutely free will would also be free from being free. And that's a problem. So to kind of solve this divine paradox, it would need to limit itself into all kinds of different limited perspectives in order to share its absolute freedom. And like I already said, from this limited state, we have to imagine what it is. And we are not 100% correct about it. And therefore, we imagine something into it, but we see that this is changing the path. This is changing actuality, or has an impact on it. And it depends, the type of impact depends on the type of projection into it. So it seems like the absolute, this initial spark, shares its absolute control with us, so that it doesn't have to control what it is that it is controlling anymore. So we can control what it is controlling in some regards, in regards to our here and now, to our limitation. But the limitation is necessary to basically make something new happen. So we can say that freedom can only be realized by sharing it. That's kind of beautiful. Another inherent problem of this initial spark would be that in the state of unlimitedness lies within a limitation to not be defined as the state that is limited. Do you get this? So In the state of unlimitedness, it would already be everything it is. There wouldn't be any experience, any discovery anymore. And everything in this unlimited state would already be done. Instantly. Initially. No before. And how do you break the inherent limitation of the state of unlimitedness to not be able to describe or be the state of limitation? Through limitation. Through limitation. Yeah. So, why is this so beautiful? Why is this a beautiful problem? It's a beautiful problem because it automatically leads to the conclusion that your existence, everyone's existence in a limited state, is the solution to the problem, and that automatically denies nihilism because of a beautiful inherent problem. How do you like this? Let me know. So, yeah, that kind of implies as well that we are not supposed to cease to exist, but to keep existing, because this pathway that has started with your experience opens up a completely new layer, basically, of infinity. Because through the limited state, you can realize different things than you would be even able to realize in the state of unlimitedness. Oh, the bug just came back. It's so cute. Do you get that? So, the implications of that concept are actually very beautiful. And it really opens up infinity for you to explore. And we would basically then be here to develop ourselves into souls, let's call it souls, that are capable of navigating infinity in a self-determined, sovereign manner. And this is basically what we are growing into. Because, like I said, everything comes down to your interpretation of everything fundamentally from the perspective of the self. And therefore, it's for the self, it's always about a becoming, a discovery, and a basically growing and development in a self-determined way. That's so important. So I think I leave it at that. Like I said, that's just a little bit of inspiration for you. Maybe you want to consider it. Honestly, I already gave you some information codes that will already have an impact. I mean, every information transmission is going to have an impact in some way, but it ultimately depends on you, what you do with it. So take this as inspiration and invitation for you to shape infinity anew.